So, hello and welcome back yet again to Beverly of Graustark, a kind of fun little book that I'm enjoying. It's not a serious book by any means, but you know what? Books don't always have to be serious. This one is it kind of reminds me of like a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. It's definitely a fish out of water type story and very melodramatic, you know? I feel like this one, even back when it was written, was probably written just to be lighthearted, silly, something to pass the time as you're whiling away the afternoon. I mean, back then it was whiling away the afternoon under a bunch of newfangled things like lights and all of that other stuff. And this probably seemed at least slightly more plausible back then, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. Baldos, in our last chapter, figured out that Beverly is not a princess, and he honestly seemed kind of pleased about that because he was thinking that if she was the princess, then he was going to have to tame his feelings in his heart because he seems to be falling for her. Beverly, for her part, does not have a clue that Baldos knows, and Princess Yetive, who Beverly is pretending to be, and her cousin, I think it's her cousin, were hiding behind a curtain, spying on Beverly and Baldos when they were discovered, gasp sigh, and that was where we left off with Baldos uncovering them, realizing that he was looking at the actual princess. I don't know how the heck he managed to realize that, but he seems to be a smart fella. And deciding to just see how far he could push it by ordering them to leave. And that was where we left off. So, we are going to be jumping back into Beverly of Graustark by George Barr McCutcheon on chapter 13, The Three Princes. Not princesses, this is Three Princes, which just makes me think of that 90s song, only I think that was only two princes. Why can't I say that word? Anyway, let's just jump in. Beverly gasped. The Countess stared blankly at the new guard, and Yetive flushed deeply, bit her lip in hopeless chagrin, and dropped her eyes. A pretty turn indeed the play had taken. Not a word was uttered for a full half-minute, nor did the guilty witnesses venture out of their retreat. Baldos stood tall and impassive, holding the curtain aside. At last the shadow of a smile crept onto the face of the princess, but she kept her tones full of deep humility and spoke. "We crave permission to retire, your highness," she said, and there was virtuous appeal in her eyes. "I pray forgiveness for this indiscretion and implore you to be lenient with two miserable creatures who love you so well that they forgot their dignity." "I'm amazed and shocked," was all that Beverly could say. "You may go, but return to me within an hour. I will then hear what you have to say." Slowly, even humbly, the ruler of Graustark and her cousin passed beneath the upraised arm of their new guard. He opened a door on the opposite side of the room, and they went on out, to all appearances, completely crestfallen. The steady features of the guard did not relax for even a fraction of a second, but his heart was pounding disgracefully. "Come here, Baldos," said Beverly, a bit pale, but recovering her wits with admirable promptness. "This is a matter which I shall dispose of privately. It is to go no further, you understand?" "Yes, your highness." "All right, you may go now. Colonel Quinnox will explain everything, she said quickly. She was now eager to be rid of him. As he turned away, she saw a faint but peculiar smile at the corner of his mouth. "Come here, sir," she said hotly. He paused, face somber as an owl. "What do you mean by laughing like that?" she demanded. Baldos caught the fierce note in her voice, but he gave it proper interpretation. "Laughing, Your Highness," he told her in deep surprise. "You must be mistaken. I'm sure that I could not have laughed in the presence of a princess." It must have been a shadow then," she said, somewhat startled by this rejoinder. "Very well, then, you are dismissed." As he was about to open the door through which he had entered the room, it suddenly swung wide and Count Marlanx strode in. Baldos paused irresolutely and then proceeded on his way without paying the slightest attention to the commander of the army. Marlanx came to an amazed stop, and his face flamed with resentment. "Halt, sir," he said. "Don't you know enough to salute me, sir?" Baldos turned instantly, his figure straightening in a flash. His eyes met those of the Iron Count and did not waver, though his face went white with passion. "And who are you, sir?" he said, in a cold, steely voice that almost made the Count reel. "Your superior officer. That should be enough for you," he almost hissed. "Oh, then I see no reason why I should not salute you, sir," said Baldos, with one of his rare smiles. He saluted his superior a shade too elaborately and then turned away. General Marlanx's eyes glittered. "Stop! Have I said that you could go, sir? I have a bit of advice to—" "My command to go comes from your superior, sir," said Baldos with irritating blandness. "Be patient, General," cried Beverly. "He doesn't know any better. I'll stand sponsor for him." And Baldos went away with a light step, his blood singing, his devil-may-care heart satisfied. The look in Beverly's eyes had been very sustaining. As he left the castle, he said out loud to himself with an easy disregard of any consequences, "Well, it seems that I am to be associated with the devil as well as an angel. Heavens, June is a glorious month." "Now, you promised you would be nice to him, General Marlanx," said Beverly the instant Baldos was out of the room. "He's new at this sort of thing, you know, and besides, you didn't address him very politely for an utter stranger." "The insolent dog," snarled Marlanx, his self-control slowly returning. "He will be taught well and thoroughly, never fear, Miss Calhoun. There's a way to train recruits like him, and they never forget what they've learned." "Oh, please don't be harsh with him," she pleaded. The smile that the Iron Count gave her was not at all reassuring. "I know that he'll be sorry for what he's done, and you—" "I am quite certain that he will be sorry," he said, with a most agreeable bow in submission, though, to Beverly's appeal. "Do you want to see Mr. Lorry?" she said. "I'll send for him, General." She was at the door, impatient to be with the banished culprits. "My business with Mr. Lorry can wait," he began, with a smile that meant to be inviting, but which did not impress her pleasantly at all. "Well, anyway, I'll tell Mr. Lorry that you're here," she said with a hand on the doorknob. "Will you wait here? Goodbye." And then she was racing off through the long halls, up the broad staircases towards the boudoir of the princess. There is no telling how long the ruffled Count stayed in the anteroom, for the excited Beverly forgot to tell Mr. Lorry that he was there. There were a half a dozen people in the room when Beverly eagerly entered. She was panting with excitement. Of all the rooms in the grim old castle, the boudoir of the princess was the most famously attractive. It was really truly her home, the exquisite abode of an exquisite creature. To lounge on her divans, to loll in the chairs, to glide through her priceless rugs was the acme of indolent pleasure. Few were they who enjoyed the privileges of Little Heaven, as Harry Anguish had christened it one memorable night, long before the princess had become Mrs. Grenfall Lorry. "Now how do you feel?" cried the American girl as she paused in the door to point an impressive finger at the princess, who was lying back on a huge chair, the picture of distress and annoyance. "I will never be able to look that man in the face again," came from Yediv's humbled lips. Countess Dagmar was all smiles and in the fittest of good humor. She was the type of culprit who loves the punishment because of how much she loved the crime. "Wasn't it ridiculous? And wasn't it just too lovely?" she cried. "It was extremely theatrical," said Beverly, sitting herself on the arm of Yetiv's chair and throwing a warm arm around the princess's neck. "Have you all heard about it?" she demanded, turning to the others, who unquestionably had had only a jumbled account. "You got what you deserved," said Lorry, who was highly amused. "I wonder what your august vagabond thinks of his princess and her ladies in hiding," mused Harry Anguish. The Count and Countess Halfort were smiling in spite of the assault upon the dignity of the court. "I'd give anything to know what he really thinks," said Beverly. The princess said, "Oh, Beverly, wasn't it awful? And he marched us right out of the room." "I thought it was great," said Beverly, eyes glowing. "Wasn't it splendid? And isn't he just so good-looking?" "He is good-looking, I imagine, but I'm no judge, dear. It was utterly impossible for me to look into his face," said the princess. "What are you going to do with us?" said Dagmar. "You are to spend the remainder of your life in a dungeon with Baldos as your guard," said Beverly. "Beverly, dear, that man is no ordinary person," said the princess. "Of course he isn't," said Beverly. "He's a tall, dark mystery." "I watched him as he crossed the terrace this morning," said Lorry. "He's a striking sort of chap, and I'll bet my head that he's not what he's claiming to be." "He claims that he's a fugitive, remember?" said Beverly. "I mean that he is no common malefactor or whatever. And who and what do you suppose he is? I confess that I'm interested in the fellow, and he looks as though one might like him without even trying to. Why haven't you dug up his past history, Beverly? You're so keen on him." "Well, he positively refuses to let me dig," said Beverly. "I tried, but he squelched me." "Well, after all is said and done, he caught us peeping today, and I'm filled with shame," said Princess Yetiv. "It doesn't matter who he is. He must certainly have an unflattering opinion as to what we are." "And he's probably going to figure it out sooner or later," said the young countess, for the moment serious. "Oh, if it ever comes to that, I shall be in a splendid position to explain everything to him. Don't you see? I'm going to have to do a lot of that explaining myself." "The Baron Dangloss," announced the door of the upper hall, throwing open for the little chief of police to come in. "Your Highness sent for me?" said the Baron, advancing after a formal salutation. The princess exhibited genuine amazement. "I did, Baron Dangloss, but you must have come with the wings of an eagle. It is really not more than 3 minutes since I gave the order to Colonel Quinnox." The Baron gave a mysterious smile, but volunteered no other word. The truth is, he was entering the castle doors as the messenger had left them, but he was much too fond of the effect to spoil a good situation by any explanation. It was a long 2 miles to his office in the tower. "Something has just happened," he said, "that impels me to ask a few questions concerning Baldos, the new guard." "May I first ask what has happened?" Dangloss was at a loss for the meaning of the smile that went around the room. "It is quite personal," said the princess. "What do you know of him, though? My curiosity is aroused. Now be quiet, Beverly. You want to know as much as the rest of us." "Well, your Highness, I may as well confess that the man is a puzzle to me. He comes here a vagabond, but certainly does not act like one. He admits that he is being hunted, but takes no one into his confidence. For that, I can't blame him." "Do you have any reason to suspect who he might be?" said Laurie. "My instructions were to refrain from questioning him," said Dangloss, with a pathetic look at the plotters. "Still, I have made investigations along other lines." "Oh, and who is he?" said Beverly, quite eager now. "I don't know," came the disappointing answer. "We are confronted by a queer set of circumstances. Doubtless you all know that young Prince Danton is flying from the wrath of his half-brother, our lamented friend Gabriel. He is supposed to be in our hills with a half-starved group of followers. It seems impossible that he could have reached our northern boundaries without our outposts catching sight of him at some point. The trouble is that his face is unknown to most of us, myself included. I have been going on the presumption that Baldos is in reality Prince Dantan, but last night that belief received a shock." "Yes?" "My men, who are watching the Dawsbergen from earlier last night, came in and reported that Danton had been seen by mountaineers no more recently than Sunday. That's only 3 days ago. These mountaineers were in sympathy with him, and they refused to tell where he had gone. We only know that he was in the southern part of Graustark 3 days ago. Our new guard speaks many languages, but he has never been heard to use that of Dawsbergen. That, in and of itself, is not surprising, for of all things he would want to avoid his mother tongue. Dantan is part English by birth, and wholly so by his raising. In that, he evidently matches up with your Baldos." "Well, then, is he or is he not Prince Dantan?" cried Beverly, as though a cherished idea had just been shattered. "Well, no, not if we are to believe the tales from the south. But here's another complication. There is, as you know, Count Halfort, and perhaps all of you for that matter, know, a pretender to the throne of Axphain, the fugitive Prince Frederick. He is described as young, good-looking, a scholar, and just the next thing to a pauper." Baldos, a mere pretender, said Beverly. Never. Well, at any rate, Baldos is not who he's pretending to be, said the Baron with a smile. Then you think he might be Prince Frederick? Said Laurie. I am inclined to think so, although another complication has also arisen. May it please your Highness, I am in an amazingly tangled state of mind, said the Baron. Do you mean that another mysterious prince has come to life? Said Yetive, her eyes sparkling with interest. Early this morning, a dispatch came to me from the Grand Duke Michael of Rapthornburg, a duchy in Western Europe, informing me that the Duke's eldest son had fled from home and was known to have come to the Far East, possibly Graustark. Great Scott, said Anguish. It never rains but it hails, so here's hail to the princes 3. We are a mecca for runaway royalty, it seems. Get on with the story, Baron Dangloss, said the princess. This is starting to sound like a book. A description of the young man accompanies the offer of a very large reward for information that may lead to his return home for reconciliation, and... Here, the Baron paused dramatically. And what? Said Beverly. The description fits our friend Baldos perfectly. Oh, you don't mean that, do you? Said Laurie. Then he can be possibly any one of the 3 that you've mentioned. Let me tell you what the Grand Duke's secretary says. I do have the official notice, but I left it on my desk. The runaway son of the Grand Duke is named Cristobal. He's 27 years of age, speaks English fluently and French and Graustarkian. It seems that he attended an English college with Prince Danton and some of our own young men who are still off in England. 6 weeks ago, he disappeared from his father's home, and at the same time, a dozen wild and venturous retainers left the Grand Duchy. The party was seen in Vienna a week later, and the young Duke boldly announced that he was off to the east to help his friend Danton fight for his throne. Going on the theory that Baldos is Cristobal, we have only to provide a reason for his preferring the wilds to our cities. In the first place, he knows that there is a large reward for his apprehension, and he fears our police. In the second place, he does not care to direct the attention of Prince Danton's foes to himself. I figure that he missed Danton in the hills and was probably lost for weeks, but the true reason for his flight is made plain in the story that was printed recently in Paris and Berlin. According to them, Cristobal rebelled against his father's right to select a wife for him. The Grand Duke had chosen a noble, wealthy bride, and Cristobal had selected a beautiful girl from the lower walks of life. Father and son quarreled, and neither gave an inch. Cristobal would not marry his father's choice, and the Grand Duke would not sanction his union with a plebeian. Here, Beverly exclaimed proudly, her face glowing. He doesn't look like the sort of man who could be bullied into marrying anybody if he didn't want to. And he does strike me as the sort who would marry anyone that he set his heart upon having, said the princess. Huh, said Beverly. The Baron went on with his narrative, exhibiting signs of excitement. To lend more color to the matter, Cristobal's sweetheart, the daughter of a game warden, was killed the night before her lover fled. I know nothing of the circumstances around this crime, but it is my understanding that Cristobal is not a suspect. It is possible that he doesn't know even now the girl's fate. Well, by God, we've got a good lot of heroes around us, said Laurie. But after all, said the Countess, Baldos might be none of these men. Oh, good heavens, Aunt Yvonne, don't suggest anything so distressing, said Yetive. He's got to be one of them. Well, I've got a good way of determining the matter, said Anguish. Let us send for Baldos and ask him point blank who he is. I think it's up to him to clear away the mystery. No, said Beverly. It does seem to be the only way, said Laurie. But I promised him that no questions would be asked, said Beverly, tearing up but resolute. Didn't I yet, Your Highness? Alas, we both promised, said the princess, with a little smile of resignation, but loyalty in the clasp of her hand to Beverly. And that is where the chapter ends. We three kings of Graustark are... Actually, it wouldn't be Graustark, it would be Axphain. Every time you think that you can't get another tangle, they throw another tangle into this story. And yeah, I didn't think of the Three Kings song until right when I was closing the book, but the one that was definitely going through my head was... Who was it that sang it? The Two Princes? We're two princes who adore you. Na 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 na. All right, enough of that. But yeah, that was the only song I could think of when I read the title of this, even though I know it was two princes and not three. So, three choices, or Baldos could be what he says he is. He could just be a goat hunter. I doubt it, but he could. You never know. I guess we're going to have to wait and see. Thank you, as always, for listening. I hope that you enjoyed that silly chapter as much as I did. I'm definitely enjoying this book more than I thought I was going to, especially with the whole, way it was written, time it was written, and the depiction of Aunt Fanny, which I don't appreciate, but the rest of it is just, it's very campy, it's very fun, and I'm having a good time with it, and I hope you are too. As always, thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to hit the thumbs up on your way out if you enjoyed this, and I will see you Saturday.